It's amusing how life can take an unexpected turn when you least anticipate it. I'm Victoria, and this is the tale of how a small misunderstanding nearly derailed my marriage. You might assume the title of this story is a joke. Cheating with our cat. I assure you, it's not a joke, but it is a lesson I won't soon forget. It all began on a calm Tuesday night. My husband, Mark, was away at a business conference, leaving me with our overly affectionate Maine Coon, Mr. Whiskers. Being someone who thrives on routine, I spent the evening lounging in the living room, scrolling through social media, and sipping chamomile tea. That's when James, an old college friend, messaged me. "Hey, Victoria. Long time no talk. How's life treating you?" I hadn't spoken to James in years. He was one of those friends who was always around but never crossed any boundaries. Someone I trusted completely. James had a charismatic charm that put you at ease. His message seemed harmless, so I replied, "Hey, James. Wow, it's been ages. Life's good. What about you?" Our chat started as casual small talk, catching up on careers, family, and life. But as the hours passed, I found myself enjoying his company more than anticipated. It wasn't inappropriate, but there was a nostalgic comfort in reminiscing about old memories with someone who knew a version of me from before marriage and adulthood. The messages soon turned into a phone call. We laughed, joked, and shared stories from the past. It felt like reconnecting with an old part of myself. But then, as we talked about our favorite professors and how bad we were at economics, Mr. Whiskers jumped onto my lap, purring loudly into the phone. "Who's that?" James asked, laughing. "Oh, that's Mr. Whiskers, my giant fur ball of a cat," I said, scratching behind his ears. "Still the crazy cat lady, I see." James teased. "Guilty as charged," I replied, chuckling. At some point, I casually mentioned that Mark was out of town. James didn't seem to think much of it, but in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. Before I knew it, the clock struck midnight. "All right, I should let you go before Mr. Whiskers gets jealous," James said jokingly. "Good night, James," I replied with a smile, hanging up the phone. The next morning, I awoke to Mr. Whiskers knocking my coffee mug off the table. As I cleaned up the mess, I felt a twinge of guilt. Not because I thought I'd done anything wrong, but because I hadn't mentioned the call to Mark. Was it really a big deal? Probably not, but keeping it a secret didn't sit well with me. Later that day, I received another message from James. "Had a great time catching up last night. Let's not wait so long to talk again." I hesitated before replying. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk to him again, but I didn't want to cross any lines. "Same here. Let's keep in touch," I finally wrote. And that should have been the end of it. But life has a peculiar way of turning a seemingly harmless moment into chaos. A few days later, Mark returned from his trip. I was excited to see him and ensured everything was perfect for his return. His favorite dinner, a clean house, and even a fresh haircut for Mr. Whiskers. But something felt off. Mark seemed distracted, almost distant. Initially, I attributed it to work stress, but as the evening progressed, his mood didn't improve. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked as we sat down for dinner. He hesitated, then looked me straight in the eye. "Victoria, is there something you need to tell me?" My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. "You tell me." For a moment, it felt like the air had left the room. Could he have somehow discovered my chat with James? But how? I hadn't breathed a word of it to anyone, and I was sure James wouldn't have either. "Mark, I genuinely don't know what you're referring to," I said, bewildered. He exhaled, frustration etched on his face. All right, maybe I'm just imagining things. The rest of the evening passed in uncomfortable silence. The following day took an even stranger turn. While I was folding laundry, Mark entered the room, holding my phone. "He's James?" he asked, his tone icy. My stomach sank. "He's an old college friend," I replied, attempting to sound nonchalant. Mark arched an eyebrow. "And why is he texting you about how much he enjoyed your late-night chats?" I felt my face go pale. "Mark, it's not what it seems," I stammered. "We were just catching up." "Nothing happened." "Nothing happened," he echoed, clearly skeptical. "Victoria, you didn't even mention you were talking to him. How am I supposed to trust that?" I wanted to explain, but the words failed me. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I'd kept it from him, making it appear as though I had something to conceal. By evening, the tension was unbearable. Mark remained silent, and I was at a loss for how to mend things. Then, out of nowhere, Mr. Whiskers leaped onto Mark's lap, purring loudly. "You know," Mark said, petting the cat, "I'd trust Mr. Whiskers over you right now." It was a joke, or at least I hoped it was. But it hurt all the same. That night, sleep eluded me. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized just how delicate trust can be. What began as an innocent chat with an old friend had snowballed into a full-blown crisis. The days that followed were tense, to say the least. Mark spoke to me only when necessary, his words terse and clipped. I couldn't fault him for being upset. Trust had clearly been shaken. But I was at a loss for how to repair it. It was during one of these painfully quiet evenings that the unexpected occurred. I was on the couch, nervously petting Mr. Whiskers, when Mark entered holding his phone. His expression was a mix of confusion and amusement. "Victoria," he said, his tone lighter than it had been in days. "We need to talk." I braced myself, expecting another round of questioning. "Okay," I said cautiously. Mark handed me his phone. On the screen was a screenshot of an Instagram story. It was a picture of me on the couch, laughing with Mr. Whiskers on my lap. The caption read, "Reunited with my old flame and his jealous competition." James had posted it. I stared at the screen, incredulous. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mark crossed his arms. "That's what I'd like to know." Suddenly, everything clicked. This was the reason for Mark's strange behavior. He'd seen the post and leaped to conclusions. "Mark, I swear I had no idea he posted this," I said quickly. "He was joking about Mr. Whiskers being jealous of our conversation. That's all it was." Mark frowned, still skeptical. "And you didn't think to tell me you were talking to him at all?" I sighed, feeling a mix of guilt and frustration. "I should have. I see now that keeping it from you made it look like I had something to hide. But I promise, nothing happened. James is just an old friend." Mark sat down, his expression softening a bit. "It's not just about the post, Victoria. It's about not telling me. Trust isn't just about not doing anything wrong. It's about being open and honest." His words hit me hard. He was right. I hadn't done anything wrong in talking to James. But by not being transparent, I'd sown seeds of doubt. That night, Mark and I had a long, heartfelt conversation. I explained how the chat with James had stirred nostalgia for a simpler time in my life. But it was entirely platonic. "I guess I feared you'd think I was trying to relive the past," I confessed. Mark looked at me, his expression softening. "Victoria, I'm not concerned about your past. What matters to me is our present. I just need to know that we're in this together, that we can trust each other." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "I promise, Mark. No more secrets." The following day, I decided to call James to set some boundaries. "Hey, James," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Victoria, what's up?" he replied cheerfully. I paused for a moment before speaking. "Listen, I've really enjoyed catching up with you, but we need to be mindful of how we communicate. That Instagram post caused some issues between me and Mark." James immediately apologized. "Oh no, I didn't mean to cause any trouble, I was just joking around. I'll take it down right away." "Thanks," I said, feeling relieved. "I just think it's best if we keep our conversations casual and occasional. Mark and I are working on our relationship, and I don't want anything to interfere with that." James agreed, and we ended the call on good terms. Over the next few weeks, Mark and I focused on rebuilding our trust. We started spending more quality time together, going on date nights and having open discussions about our feelings. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Mark came home with a small box in his hands. He placed it on the kitchen table and gestured for me to open it. Inside was a tiny collar with a tag that read, "Trusty the cat, always watching." I burst out laughing. "You're never going to let me live this down, are you?" I said, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes. "Not a chance," Mark replied, grinning. We decided to keep the tag as a reminder of the lessons we'd learned about communication, trust, and the importance of not jumping to conclusions. As for Mr. Whiskers, he became a symbol in our relationship, a reminder that even the most innocent things can cause chaos if we're not careful. Looking back, I realize how close we came to letting a small misunderstanding turn into a big problem. But in the end, it brought us closer together. And as strange as it sounds, I'll always be grateful for that crazy, dramatic, ridiculous moment in our lives. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that trust, much like a cat, requires care, attention, and sometimes a good laugh to keep it alive.